This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. In-depth conversations with people who are making a difference in the lives of others here and around the world. Culture is at the heart of who you are. Know your culture, find yourself on Open Door with Vince Robinson.
Grand Dawning, Great Rising, Cleveland, and the rest of planet Earth. Welcome to another edition of Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest today received his Bachelor of Arts degree in Sociology from Harvard College and his law degree from Columbia University School of Law. He spent 20 years in the law profession, serving in various capacities, including Chief Prosecutor of the cities of Cleveland and East Cleveland, Assistant U.S. Attorney, Judge, Civil Rights, and Defense Attorney. In 2006, he was called to the ministry in the Primitive Baptist Church. He continued to advocate for social justice issues in the Cleveland area and environmental and health issues statewide as past chairman of the Ohio Alliance of People for Environment and co-chaired an initiative to educate and mobilize the residents of 5 Cleveland inner city communities on environmental and health issues. Welcome to Open Door with Vince Robinson, Mr. Mark A. McClain. Mark, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I just got fatigued by listening to all that stuff you just said.
Yeah.
I had forgotten about that stuff.
Okay.
Some of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you and I have been on the planet for at least 60 years, I'm assuming. I don't know your age, but I think you're probably around the same age as I am. So
yeah,
a lot can happen in that time.
And a lot can't happen in that, too.
True that.
So, but we continue forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I did ask you before we started this broadcast, you indicated to me that you have been a native Clevelander, but you said that you had some Alabama ties. You want to talk about those?
Yeah, I was a year and a half when I was constantly ill, and my grandfather came from Alabama and came and got me and took me back down there. And he was some people call a roots man. He would dig in the ground or pick leaves off a tree and boil them and make poultices, etc. And he worked on me down there and brought me back to health. I went to school down there. I was in kindergarten and first grade down there, second grade in Cleveland, third grade down there, and back here in Cleveland for the fourth grade, and so forth and so on. So, Alabama, Hueytown, Alabama in particular, is close to my heart.
Okay. So as a child, you were there, and then as an adult, did you spend time down there too?
No, just visiting. My history was down during the time of where the civil rights movement was very hot and active. I was down there when the church got bombed. I was down there when the little kids were sprayed with fire hoses. It was a time that wasn't very pleasant. Bull Connor was at his finest back then. Freedom Riders. When my mother came down to see me down there, she couldn't park her car in the driveway. She had to park it behind the house, for fear that there were people in the neighborhood or in that area who would think they were freedom riders, and that would put them in danger.
Interesting. I have to ask this question then. Did what you witnessed during those days influence your decision to go into the field of law?
Absolutely. I wanted to be a lawyer since I was 5 years old. My interest in law started, and my grandfather had this certain prescience about him. He taught me how to read when I was 3 years old. And when I was here in Cleveland, he would write me letters, and he would print the name on the envelope, Mark McClain, Esquire. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I had a feeling that he did. So I was very thankful for his presence in my life.
Yeah, that's really amazing. You know, when you look at that whole phenomenon of manifestation,
Yeah.
envisioning, he planted a seed back then, and
Yep.
obviously that seed bore fruit. What
Yeah.
was your experience at Harvard like?
It was for the most part good. Although I came there in '74, and that was a time when Boston schools were being integrated. So that was a volatile time there, and that kind of started to color my experience at Harvard because the boys of South Boston didn't stay in South Boston. They were all around Boston, and you had to be careful where you went, and when you went, you had to keep your eyes open.
Yeah, and I also have to ask you, you kind of alluded to it, but being a black student in an institution like that, I can't imagine that there were many of you, very many of you at that time. What was that like for you?
Well, Boston, Cambridge was a very there were all different kinds of people there. I don't recall the number of black students at Harvard, but there was enough to so we could keep each other company, and rely on each other if needed. There were some very forward-thinking young people there, and I enjoyed the interaction and the learning process. Not only did you learn from your professors, but you also learned from fellow students. It was a great experience. Um, so I loved it.
Yes. And you studied sociology, and I'm just looking back to my own college experience, and I only had one sociology class. It was impactful, but I just developed this idea that folks who went into the field of sociology had to have a lot of compassion for people because, from what I could see, it wasn't something where you could really make a whole lot of money. And as I speak to folks who do social work, sometimes they talk about the burnout that happens from being that person that's on the helping side and being frustrated with that.
Well, I didn't go into sociology because I wanted to do social work per se. My social work was always was intended to be law. So they had a fabulous um, faculty in the social work department. There was a man named Lee Rainwater, who wrote a seminal book about urban black urban centers, and I was anxious to kind of interface with him. In fact, he became my advisor, and there was a famous black sociologist. So I wanted to learn from them. It's I wanted to go into law, but I understood that to really apply the law, you had to understand people. And I wanted my bailiwick to be in those neighborhoods where I came from because I knew they needed help. So that's why sociology for me.
Yeah, that really makes sense. I know a lot of folks who go into law that study political science first, or maybe psychology or something like that. But you chose
Yeah,
sociology.
yeah.
Interesting. What about Columbia? What was that experience like for you?
Columbia was New York, and institutions take on the personality of where they are, and Columbia took on the personality of New York. Um, Brash, brazen, cold, very. I can't think of the word I want to use right now, but um, you knew you were in New York. To go there, it was the years I was there. It was the top law school in the country. So there's a lot of things happening there. The black students were very conscious of who they were, what their mission should be. There was a cadre that followed Dr. Ben. All of the black scholars on the forefront of change. They would come through there. So that was New York. That was Columbia. Um, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Um, so we good thing there were students who were traveling on fellowships, and they would come back. There we had ties to Gaddafi. There were just things that couldn't happen. Certainly not from Cleveland State, but it was a tough school. They very competitive. That school sent more lawyers to Wall Street than any other school. I don't know if it's same still, but it was a tale of two cities, from those who wanted to go to Wall Street to those who wanted to change the world. So it was quite an experience.
And obviously, your choice was to save the world.
Oh, yeah. You can look at my bank account and tell.
Right. Interesting that what you say about New York, because so many folks think that, the place they want to be is New York because so much is happening. It's the city that never sleeps, and it's just always a lot of hustle and bustle and so forth and so on. But just reflecting, on the past, visiting New York and flying through New York and so forth and so on, it never has been the type of place that I would want to live. I mean, it's cool to zip in and zip out, but just that thought, man, you got to pay $15-20 just to cross the bridge to get into the city. That's just crazy. Can you imagine what it would be like if you had to do that every day in Cleveland?
I can imagine if you had to do it anywhere.
Yes, indeed.
And plus, back then, 42nd Street was live and well with all of that stuff there, and it wasn't a pleasant city in that you saw, by riding the subway, you saw people suffering. And there's a mental health problem. There's a cleanliness problem. When I first got to New York, I didn't even want to eat there. It just seemed so unsanitary. But I guess I must have been relegated to a part of the city, because then I discovered Park Avenue, and that atmosphere. It was really it was a difference. Certainly a difference from Alabama. Certainly a difference from Cleveland,
Yes.
and even a difference from Cambridge, Massachusetts,
Well,
and the difference
yeah.
from New Hampshire, where I went to high school.
Yeah. Well,
So,
thankfully, you made the decision to come back to Cleveland, and you could eliminate that need to pay so much to cross the bridge into Jersey or wherever else. You're listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU, Burton-Bell Carr Community Radio. My guest is Mark McClain. We're going to talk about law a little bit, but we're going to get into some other aspects of his life when we return.
This is DJ Chris Dowles, Programs and Music Director here at WOVU 95.9 FM. Our Voices United, a Burton-Bell Carr Community Radio station. WOVU 95.9 FM sends a big thank you to the entire staff of the St. Luke's Foundation and President and CEO Timothy Tramble for awarding WOVU 95.9 FM $25,000 to purchase the WOVU 95.9 FM mobile vehicle. On behalf of our entire team, our Executive Director, Joy Johnson, and Executive Board, we said thank you, St. Luke's Foundation, for continuing addressing social determinants of health for our people in our neighborhoods and throughout Cuyahoga County. Thank you. This message is being brought to you by WOVU 95.9 FM. Our Voices United, a Burton-Bell Carr Community Radio station.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson and the conversation with Mr. Mark A. McClain, who went to Harvard University and Columbia University, hanging out in New York and discovering how, I want to say, wretched a place it can be despite all of the things that people extol. You know, interesting, Tri-C Jazz Fest over the last week, because this will be on the air later, but somebody was talking about New York, and they were talking about the theater district that we have here in Cleveland. This is a complete aside, but they mentioned that New York has the first, Cleveland has the second. And he said, you know, the difference between New York and Cleveland is that during the winter, folks have to walk outside to get from one theater to the other. But here in Cleveland, we have the privilege of walking through buildings inside to get from one place to another. So there really is something special about Cleveland. So you got your law degree from Columbia, and then you, came back to Cleveland?
Came back to Cleveland, and I clerked for a federal court judge, William K. Thomas, who was named by Fortune magazine as being in the top 40 trial judges in the country. And he was a brilliant man, very task oriented. He was meticulous in his preparation, and I would like to say that he passed some of those skills on to me. And was there for 2 years, and I did the big firm circuit, working for 2 or 3 big firms. Did not like it. It really wasn't why I went to law school. And I had an encounter with a partner of one of the firms when I had my first son and wanted to get a diaper service. This was in days, I think, before Pampers got big. And I called up a diaper service in the city and wanted them to deliver diapers to my house. And he said, where do you live? And I said, I live 89th and Chester in the Huff area. And he said, oh, we don't deliver there. I said, what do you mean we don't deliver there? He said, we don't deliver in that area. It's too dangerous. And I was, at the time, on the head of the board of one of the neighborhood agencies. And that was one of the things we studied. And I learned from that experience that during that time, the Huff area was not crime ridden. In fact, it was one of the better neighborhoods. And so I said, well, I'm a lawyer. I'll see about that. And he said, oh, where do you practice law? And I was with one of the big firms. And I told him what firm was at. He said, oh, yeah, that's my lawyer. That's my law firm. They represent us. And so I said, okay. So I went and talked to the partner in charge of that book of business and told him that he was violating federal law by refusing to service me. And the partner said, well, you can't mess with him. And so that painted the picture in my mind of everything I was against. And so I left there and started doing the things that I really think my life was intended to do.
So what kinds of things were you doing? I'm assuming that you started a private practice and you had an agenda based on your relationship with sociology. What kinds of things were you doing as a private practice attorney?
Well, first, I didn't go to private practice first off. I went to another firm because I felt it's important to really learn the real estate industry. So I practiced real estate with one of the larger firms. And from there, I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office and spent some time there doing criminal and civil litigation. And from there, I went to the city of Cleveland. I was Mayor Michael White's first prosecutor. And probably the only one who went to jail, too, when I got into a little tiff with a judge. He fined me and found me in contempt and sent me to jail. And with that whole matter was cleared up, and frankly, that's how the judge lost the election, trying by abusing his power, and that taught me a very valuable lesson in that during this whole matter, I really gained a lot of fans by standing up to the judge. And for years, I had gotten greeting cards during Christmas and holidays from just older people who liked the way I handled it. And I had a cadre of followers. And so from there, I went out into my own private practice.
Okay.
And I did civil rights and real estate and, a little bit of personal injury, medical malpractice. I did a number of different things.
Well, one of the things listed in the bio that I found also has judge.
I was a substitute judge in East Cleveland.
Okay.
For Unikeenan.
Okay. Interesting, Mark, that it seems like at every turn you were encountering I can call it institutional racism, or I'll just call it racism. I mean, the idea that you work for a firm that represented a client that the firm knew based on what you said was violating law, but they didn't want to stand up for law. That doesn't make sense to me.
It didn't make sense to me either. Although, in one sense, it didn't make sense. In another sense, if you understand the beast, law is one thing. Law on paper is one thing, but it is only as good as the people who enforce it. And as an institution, as a country, as a government, as industry, they can always bend things in their favor. So the question is, will you tilt against windmills, or will you do something else? So that's a reality.
Mm-hmm. So after serving as an assistant U.S. attorney, a substitute judge, and civil rights and defense attorney, you decided to start a new chapter in your life. And I'm sure that there were some circumstances that contributed to your decision to do that. Can you tell us what they were?
We'll be more specific.
You had a private practice, and then perhaps you shifted gears, or maybe there was something that happened in your life that said to Mark, I don't want to do this anymore.
Well, you know what? Seeds had been planted from my childhood. One was law, the other was a ministry, and I ended up being called to the ministry, and I was a preacher. But that preaching really was geared towards making people aware of their power and how they should live their lives, but not just spiritually, but holistically. Health. During that time, I think churches are paying more attention to this now, but back then, they would, for instance, Sunday dinners, fried chicken, pork chops, and then they're wondering, one church I was going to, they had a Black History celebration every year. And, you come dressed in your interpretation of Black history, and they'd feed you chitlins and stuff. And it was a Saturday night, and the next day, Sunday morning, the place was half full because people were at home with high blood pressure. And we have to, our body is a temple. And my effort to that education was what was a hoop house. And we actually had services in the hoop house. And we would try to teach people how to grow food, teach people how to properly prepare food, and so to live a healthier lifestyle. And the church was called the Growing Church, and the problem with that was that people are so used to living out of sync that it was hard to get people to really understand this concept.
Yes, it really seems to be an uphill battle to get folks to embrace things that our grandparents used to do. For instance,
Yeah,
my grandparents had a garden for as long as I can remember in the
yeah.
backyard. And, we're seeing now that it's getting more and more important to get back to growing food. And I want to talk about that when we get back from our next break. This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest is Mark McClain. This is 95.9 FM WOVU, Burton Bell Car Community Radio. Our voices united. Back in a sec.
Many people in our community dream of owning a home. Unfortunately, many also feel that that dream is out of reach. However, family, Qi Bank is committed to changing that. Qi Bank partners with a variety of mortgage programs focused on meeting the needs of borrowers, including offering down payment assistance, affordable and government loans, and solutions for first-time home buyers. A Qi community mortgage is also a great way to help reach the goal of home ownership. It allows you to take advantage of low down payment options, and qualifying is easier than you might think. It's one more way Qi Bank is supporting neighbors and neighborhoods in the communities that they proudly call home. To learn more, visit your local Qi Bank branch and speak to a licensed mortgage loan officer. Qi Bank and home lending products offered by Qi Bank are not FDIC insured or guaranteed. Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 399797.
This message has been brought to you by Qi Bank and WOVU 95.9 FM. Our voices united, Burton Bell Car Community Radio.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson and the conversation with my guest, Mark McClain, who initiated a church where growing was a part of what they did. You just expressed the idea that some folks really just couldn't fully embrace it. But it seems to me that ministry was not just about religion, but you used the term holistic earlier in our conversation. I get the impression that you had an awareness, and I'll go back to the relationship that you had with your grandfather and the fact that he was able to use some of those modalities to bring you back to health. Continue to tell us about the experience that you had with the church.
Well, I would have. We got a hoop house from the USDA, Department of Agriculture. And we would plant. We got kids. It was a lot easier to get kids than adults. So we get children in, and we had tutoring. We had a reading program during the summer, and I used to pick up bread from a local bakery, exquisite bread. And it was an eye-opening experience because I would go throughout the neighborhoods. We operated in Mount Pleasant. Go door to door. Would you like this bread? And some people wouldn't even open the doors for living in fear that they can't accept a gift, a blessing. Which really bothered me. So I continued to try to get people to come on in. And I would plant, we had beautiful winter crops of mustard greens, turnip greens, collard greens. And so we would leave the doors open. So if someone needed some food, they could just go in and they could just pick the food. And we had lessons on how to prepare the food healthy without pork, grease, and all of that stuff. And it was a fulfilling experience, at least for me, to try to touch people and really give them a new way of living. And At one point, I suffered a stroke, and so my prayer when I suffered this stroke, because I was told that I would never walk again, but my prayer was that God would give me a technique or the ability to walk again, and if that happened, however it happened, I would share with as many people as I could. And a couple of weeks after I got out of the hospital, I ran into a friend who saw me walking and said, "Oh, you look terrible." I said, "Well, thank you." And she said, "What can I do to help you?" And this was a Chinese American woman. And she, when she asked me that, I said, "You can help fix my leg." I was saying in jest, and she said, "Okay." And she went to the phone and she called a man. The man happened to be Guang Bao Wei, who is a master in the art of Qi Gong. And she took me from her business down in Chinatown. In the middle of the day, she left her bakery, and she told me to get in the car. I got in the car. We drove out to Stowe, Ohio. 40 minutes drive, and went to this man's house. And she knocked on the door. We went in, and they had a conversation, which I didn't participate in because I don't speak Chinese. And working on me. And when he started working on me, after a little bit, he asked me would I like to study with him. And my answer was yes. And for the next 13 years, I studied Qigong with Master Wei. And I learned so much about healing. And I've been trying to pass that on to our community, teaching meditation. I had a wonderful program this last summer where, in conjunction with Ferial Partners, they have a grandparents program for grandparents who are raising their grandkids. I got a grant from St. Luke's Foundation, and I took on 30 youth from 6 to 16 in a 12-week program teaching them Qigong and meditation. It changed their life. I mean, it was beautiful to see. I was able to give them from grant funds $500 if they could finish this program successfully, this 12-week program, and another $500 if they could sit down at the end of the program and meditate for 1 hour. And there were 15 children who finished the program and 7 children who could sit and meditate for 1 hour. And these were kids from, 7, was one girl from was 6, and they were anywhere 7, 9, 12, 14, 15, and 16. and we're working on doing something else with them. I can't say right now what it is, but it's you'll probably hear about it.
That sounds like a great deal to me.
Oh.
$1,000 to learn how to be quiet for an hour. I wish someone would come to me with that deal.
But can you pass?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you would be faking meditation for an hour, but I know I could be still and quiet and keep my eyes closed for an hour if it was going to lead to me getting $500. I guarantee you that.
You have to understand, these children were on the spectrum. They were ADHD. They had anxiety problems, depression problems, and this turned their lives around. They started performing in school much better. I mean, even I didn't know it would have such an effect on them. And I just finished talking to the people from Fair Hill Partners just minutes before I started talking to you, and those children are still thriving.
Yeah, it's amazing indeed. It can have a significant impact on young as well as old. And there are so many other things, but this specifically, it has a transformative impact. And it does my heart good to know that there were some who actually did make it through and were able to enjoy a certain modicum of success because they completed the program. And you did this in partnership with Fair Hill Partners?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
And I'm hoping to keep the program going in some form. I'm working on that now.
Yeah. Well, as you say this, it just seems like perhaps it's something that should be instituted in education, period. I mean, just something as simple as, 10 minutes out of a school day to center students and prepare them for the day seems to make sense to me. What do you think?
Absolutely. And I actually pitching this idea now to certain school systems. I have taught these techniques in the Cleveland Heights school system. I'm hoping to get an entree into Cleveland. I've talked to them about a year or so ago, and nothing's happened. And I've been trying to get into the East Cleveland school systems. But these bureaucracies are tough. They don't want to look at things that are new, innovative. These things can transform lives. I've seen it.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I guess the other side of that coin is there intentionality in the way education systems are designed? Because in some instances, it just seems like those systems operate to diminish the abilities of students and not to expand their abilities. They kind of push down at creativity. And I think, I take in a lot of information about holistic healing and alternatives to the allopathic method of medicine. And I can see that it's not really about a cure. It's really more so about treatment for profit. And so, when you look at the American diet, there are so many things that cause children to have those behavioral issues. And then on top of that, you have those electronic devices that cause them to have issues. So the odds are stacked against success in education as far as I'm concerned. I could be wrong about that. But, the other thing is taking art, taking music, taking those things out of school systems. And those, again, are things that they provide a direct benefit to students, but they don't, in terms of administrators and so forth, they don't fully get it, or they're so concerned about dollars or the grade of the system that they let those things go without considering the losses that will happen in terms of the students. Really interesting conversation. When we return, I want to talk to you about how you recovered from your stroke. And I know Qi Gong played a pivotal role in that, but also talk to you about the things that you're doing now in addition to what you did last year with those students. This is Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU. We'll be right back.
Cleveland, we know you have something to say. We know there are things on your mind you've been itching to get out. Call the WOVU Talkback line, 216-200-7848, and tell us what it's all about. Tell us what's bothering you. Tell us what makes you happy. Tell us what you want to hear on WOVU. Call or text the WOVU Talkback line, 216-200-7848. This is WOVU, our voices united. We can't do what we do without you.
Welcome back. Rounding third and headed home. So I've learned some really interesting things about you, Mark. I just discovered last week when we reacquainted that you were studying Qi Gong to the level that you were and you are. And I'm also kind of wondering if right now you're doing anything to bring Qi Gong, the ministry of Qi Gong, to some of us older folks.
Yeah, well, historically I have been teaching in libraries. I've even made presentations and I've taught in churches. I am going to start. I started regular session in a church here in East Cleveland this Thursday. I don't want to name the church until they say it's okay to say so. But it's simply because this is my belief. Qi, this essential energy, is the Holy Spirit. Part of my learning this art was we would go out. And the fascinating thing about it was when I was invited to teach. I'm sorry, to learn this. My teacher told me, "Well, I won't teach you unless you bring 5 people with you." And I was, I guess he wanted to spread the word. But at some point I asked him, he wasn't charging us anything. So one day I asked his wife, because she was the interpreter, first of all, why pick me? This man was the director of the largest non-medical clinic in China. And if you know a little bit of history about Qigong, it's against the philosophy of the Chinese government these days, simply because they bring a lot of people together, and the government is threatened by that. But to answer my question, he said, I chose you because I want you to go out and heal your community. This Chinese man saying he wanted someone to come and help heal our community. I thought that was fascinating. So when we started, and interestingly enough, when he would show us a certain technique, many times his wife would quote a Bible verse. And so I would go home and I'd read that Bible verse and say, that makes sense. And so then one day we were in his basement. He was showing us this movement. And I was sitting there and I was looking at the movement, and I was saying, this movement is so familiar. Where have I seen this from? And I was sitting there trying to think where I saw this movement from. And this movement I saw in church. This was the movement that people do spontaneously when the Spirit hits them. So I started putting two and two together. I said, well, this is, then I read passages of the Bible, um, 2 Timothy, where Paul is talking to Timothy, and he's urging him to stir up the Spirit inside you. There's a spirit, there's an energy, a spirit inside you in which you can grasp and to do things, get things accomplished. In the book of John, Christ is talking to his disciples, and he says, we can do anything that Christ did, we could do. And it always fascinated me by that verse. Say, how can we do everything that Christ does? Christ is the Son of God, and so it goes to show, to indicate that there's a power inside of us that we have long ignored, that we can do just about anything. And one key element is faith. You have to believe that you can do these things. And that's more than the battle. We were taught that there are certain professions that make it difficult to practice Qi Gong. And unfortunately, one of those professions is a lawyer and accountants. Those people who like to think or have been trained to think logically, because some of the things that you see happening in the practice of Qigong is not traditionally logic. But they are. They are not logic, but they exist. So if you can grasp this power, this spirit within you, you can change your life, change circumstances. You can heal. You can do all of these things that people think you can't do. And that's what I taught those children, that, they can't say, I can't do that. You can do it. I can't sit for an hour. You can do it. You can accomplish, and you can enrich your life and make not only your life, not only you greater, but your surrounding, your environment, your community. You can change. There's this thing they do with the fingers. You put your fingers together and you concentrate and make your fingers grow. And everybody's just marvels at this, but it's true. So part of my ministry is making people believe that they can.
Just as you believed when you were having issues with your leg and having been told that you wouldn't be able to walk, you're able to walk.
Right.
Yes.
But it's people think of miracles as things that happen spontaneously, but I don't. So if you put your mind to it, get your concentration together. It took me, I didn't just start doing Qi Gong and I walked. It took a little time. It took dedication, getting up every morning, doing what I need to do, prepare my mind, prepare my body, but it can be done.
Mm. I was curious about you having to bring 5 people. Was it easy or was it difficult for you to get 5 folks to cooperate?
You have to know who's open to this and who's not. And I got 3 people, and those people reached out to people, and we put together a community, and we practiced together. We even still practice together. Mr. Wade died a couple of years ago, so now his wife is basically making sure that we continue on and we develop and practice. It's a lifelong practice. It's not, you just, study for a year and you are expert. It's something that you do for the rest of your life.
I would have to imagine, too, that it requires a certain level of discipline because we can always find reasons not to do something that we should be doing every day.
Right. For instance, meditation, Mr. Wade told us, made us, but we would have to develop so that we could meditate for 3 hours a day. And that's a long time. And your butt muscles go to sleep. But when you accomplish that, things start happening. Your power becomes stronger. You can do things that you never thought you can do.
Yes. We have just a few moments before we conclude the broadcast, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the distance from many churches from dealing with Eastern modalities like yoga, Qi Gong, and so forth and so on. Have you ever had to deal with the adversity between the two areas?
Yeah, I have. I mean, there are traditionalists who say there's no connection. That's not what I found. There is, and if you look at the history of Christianity, meditation has always been an integral part of getting closer to that to God, to that power source. In the Bible, meditation is mentioned many times, and it urges you to meditate. The only thing I think which has been a problem, or people don't understand, is that the Bible teaches you should pray like this. Our Father which art in heaven, give you a model of prayer, but it does not give you a model for meditation. I would say if that was there, people would understand better. But historically, the Desert Fathers, there were people who were Christians who meditated unceasingly.
Yes. Well, let's hope that folks pick up on the importance and the value of meditation as well as Qi Gong and other Eastern modality, because there's no question and no doubt that they can contribute to successful life. Mark McClain, it's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you. Don't be surprised if I show up in your class.
Door is open, brother.
All right.
Door is open.
Okay.
I appreciate the time to talk.
All right. Thank you for joining me. And to those who are listening, as always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make today your absolute best day. Peace.